It's a very great pleasure for our final keynote speaker this morning to introduce Patrick Vallance. I don't think you need any introductions to Patrick, but we much look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much. It's a great pleasure to be here, and great that the theme for this year is on science and international collaboration. And when I think about science, I think collaboration is crucial and challenge is crucial. Science advances through intellectual challenge, and you don't get either the collaboration you need to tackle the big problems or the challenge you need if you're parochial. And so by definition, international is absolutely essential for science. And I wanted to tackle three areas: science advice, the operational aspects of science, and then ideas and experimentation. So if I think about science advice, and I want to take this from a very personal perspective over the last couple of years, there have been two things that I've been involved with which have been absolutely dependent on international science collaboration. The first, of course, is COVID, where linking on a very regular basis with other people managing science advice in countries across the world was crucial from day one. It was an absolutely important network, and a network grew up in Europe as well, that we started informally and then grew to meet every week or every 2 weeks, depending on what stage the pandemic was at, just to exchange thoughts about what was happening, exchange data, exchange information, frankly, also to act as a bit of a self-help group to each other during the period. But what we found was that that meeting, which we set up quite early on, turned out to be the most important meeting any of those people went to, because it was a way for scientists to speak to each other and share information. And if you look at the course of the pandemic, actually the advice that came out was pretty consistent across that group of many Western European countries in this case. But of course the policy choices were different, and that is the nature of science advice. Science advice feeds into policy decision making, which takes into account all sorts of other things as well. So my first point about science advice and internationalism is it is crucial. You have to have a network. It needs to be supported by science in countries, and it helps when scientists in countries also speak to each other. And that was certainly the case right the way across COVID. We had links right the way across the UK academic space, across the whole world. The second related area was actually climate. And of course, the IPCC, you could argue, is the biggest science collaboration that's had real big policy impact. But at COP26 last year, what we did, and I was pleased Alok Sharma suggested this, we established the idea of a chief scientific advisor for COP26, and he asked me to take that up. And what that allowed me to do was to link with equivalent people in countries right the way across the world. And we had something like 30 countries, their chief scientists together speaking about what we wanted out of COP26, how science could play a role, how science could be marshaled to help inform policy and government actions around this. That, I think, was important because it allowed a consensus series of statements which were important to underpin the Glasgow goals, the Glasgow breakthroughs, and also the Adaptation Research Alliance that emerged from COP26. So point number one, science is international and science advice needs to be international with strong networks. Point number two is about operational science and infrastructure. And maybe the greatest example of this is CERN, founded in 1954 as a reaction to what had happened during the war and the fragmentation of science across Europe, to say science actually is beyond political boundaries, it's beyond immediate problems, it has to be something that works together over a long period. And CERN, of course, has a great scientific mission, but it also has a great science cultural mission as well. And if you look at what emerged from that melting pot of international science, we got a very big push for open science came from CERN. And of course, we got the unexpected spin-off benefit of the World Wide Web. And I think those things reinforce the importance of international scientific programs. And if you look in the UK, we've got the European Bioinformatics Institute, a non-EU European body, crucially important, drawing in data from around the world to provide great and crucial analysis for bioinformatics open to the rest of the world. We've got the European Centre for Mid-Range Weather Forecasting, really important part of the system to try and understand better granular prediction of weather forecasting over the medium term, a complement to our own Met Office. There's exchange of people between the two organizations, exchange of ideas, a little bit of competition in there as well. It's all good stuff, and it's all dependent upon international collaboration, again, a non-EU European body. Following COVID, to come back to COVID for a minute, there is a huge international scientific operational challenge, and that is, how do we make sure the world is better prepared for the next pandemic, which we know will happen? And there, last year at the G7 leaders endorsed the 100-day mission, which was a group of scientists that come together across the world, industry, academia, governments, to say, what would it take if we set an ambition to say, within 100 days of a new infectious organism designated a pandemic occurring, we could have vaccines ready for production at scale, an initial regimen of therapeutics, and approved and reliable diagnostics. That challenge, which involves the broader aspects of science, as the minister said, regulation, manufacturing, not just discovery science, how you actually make things operational within countries to enable the delivery of these things, is, I think, a durable mission, and one that the world is coming together on, that requires not just the G7, but the G20 and the WHO, who are key partners in this, to take that forward. So operational science is crucial. And my final point about operational science is the one that again was raised about in the question about ODA, and the fact that our ability to fund science in countries around the world, and indeed we have an extraordinarily strong reputation in that from the UK, has been beneficial for science, it's been beneficial for scientists, and actually it's been rather beneficial for diplomacy and other things as well, and we mustn't forget that. So under this heading of operational infrastructure, I want to say it's really crucial that the UK takes part in big international endeavours, particularly infrastructure ones where you can't do things alone. And it's crucial that we think about the operational aspects right the way around the world. And then my third point is science ideas and experimentation. And this is sort of the bread and butter of what the scientists we love, the idea of coming together, challenging concepts, challenging old ideas, coming up with new ones, and then doing experiments to try and see whether we're right or wrong and where that leads us. And by the way, as an aside, one of the things I learned during the pandemic is that the thing scientists love most, which is to take an idea and show it's not quite right and it needs to be changed because you've got new data, is known as a U-turn in politics. And that is not a trivial point in terms of how we interact. But science ideas and experimentation require people, require talent, require self-assembly. This is about bottom-up creativity, and require curiosity, as well as, of course, bringing in business and other parts. And that leads on to how we fund that. It doesn't happen without some money to make it happen. And international science funding is critically important as part of this. Horizon Europe has been a really, really important part of the science system across Europe and in the UK. I reckon it took nearly a decade for that to start working really well. And it is working really well now. And I think we've got to be extremely careful to think that you can just suddenly invent something that's going to replace it and work as well. You probably can, but it's not going to work instantly. And throwing away Horizon is an act of mutual self-harm by Europe and the UK if that happens. And so it's an incredibly important part. Doesn't look very promising at the moment that there can be association for the reasons the minister said, but I think it would be a very damaging thing for us not to associate to Horizon, and very damaging for the EU as well. And then my final quick points: talent underlies all of this, and it's worth reflecting when we think about international science and collaboration, that something like a third of our Nobel Prize winners are first or second generation immigrants. And that notion of being very open to people from around the world has been the bedrock of much of our scientific success and is crucial going forward. Businesses have to be part of this. Businesses, UK businesses are multinational in terms of their science, and that ability to work across boundaries is again important. And then finally, the integrated review is mentioned, the place of Britain in the world. It's not chance and it's not trivial that an entire chapter of that document was dedicated to science and technology, and every single chapter has mention of science and technology running through it. That is a big change. And I think the integrated review provides a very important blueprint for what we need to be doing, and led in turn to the formation of the National Science and Technology Council, which for the first time we have a prime ministerially chaired cabinet subcommittee focusing on science and technology, not on what gets funded in research in university A or B or research group here or there, but actually how does the whole system come together in thinking about everything from, is the research base properly funded for the future, through to what do we think about supply chains for innovation? How do we think about government procurement as a pull factor for innovation and adoption of science and technology for the benefit of society? How do we think about the finance mechanisms whereby companies can scale and become successful in this country? Those are the sorts of things that require a total cross-government view. They're not the remit just of a science department. It's every single department that needs to think about this, and every single department that needs to be enabled to implement science and technology for the benefit of citizens, which after all is what this is ultimately all about. Thank you.
We are running over and we need you to go to lunch. So just one quick question, perhaps to Patrick, if anyone has one before we move on. Yes, gentleman at the back.
Sir Patrick, thanks for that. My name's Ed Coulstock from GSK. You may remember it. All today I've heard about collaboration, the science behind everything. Great, is what I expected to hear. But ever since I was a schoolboy in Tunbridge Wells, I've followed a scientific track, but where we're looking at international collaboration, are there tricks that we're missing beyond the science? Say, for example, foreign language skills being taught at an early age, because I've worked with a team of international scientists that come and work at GSK, for example, and I'm always amazed by how well they can speak English better than I can. And that's put me off going abroad, other than maybe the US, to do any sort of postdoc, any further engagement in science. So I feel in some ways isolated. So should we be doing more in transferable skills outside of the scientific realm, inviting in other colleagues, other areas, rather than just relying on the science to carry us?
But that's exactly why I pitched the National Science and Technology Council as being about that broad aspect of what science is for and how you use it. And to do that, that doesn't just mean you want mathematicians or physicists or biologists. We need social scientists, we need arts, humanities to be part of this. And by the way, and you'll know this from GSK, and I certainly saw this when I was head of R&D, if I was trying to recruit a top person to this country, they care, of course, about the science base, they care about the interactions, they care about their colleagues, but they care about things like, is the theatre good? Can their children go to school? Are they going to be educated properly? Where do they live and is it nice? So these things are inseparable. And if we want to be, to use the minister's phrase, a science superpower, we can't do that just by concentrating on the very narrow bit of technical science.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dale. I'm sorry we're so pushed for time, but that's very helpful. Thank you. And one last round of applause.